wasn't notified or told or whatever. So, and I have nothing prepared for the class. So I've got stuff prepared for the 5th and 6th grade class, and I offered Don Brown to take this, and he said he'd rather go take the 5th and 6th grade class. So y'all got me again. I'm sorry. So one of the things that I try to do is I always try to keep a sermon in my back pocket, as they say. And this is a sermon that, this was a series of sermons that I preached a number of years ago, and it came out of the book Dare to Care Like Jesus. Leslie Flynn wrote it. Excellent, excellent book. I recommend it highly. And so I've pulled some thoughts out of that. We can study that. It's going to be coming out of Matthew 13. So if you want to turn to Matthew 13, we can spend some time there. There is nothing set in stone about this tonight. So if there are questions about something that is completely unrelated that you would like to discuss, now is the perfect time because we do not have an itinerary. So one of the things that we all face in life, it happens from time to time, is we find ourselves alone. If you live long enough, you're going to lose a spouse. You know, if you're married and you live, eventually one of you is going to pass. And so at some point in life, we find ourselves very much alone. And I had never thought about Jesus being lonely until I read that book, Dare to Care Like Jesus. And you know, when you think about Jesus being God, coming from his abode, that is not earth, he was surrounded by people, but it wasn't home here. He left home, right, to come here, to dwell with us for a period of time. But this wasn't where he was staying forever. He was coming here. He had a mission to accomplish. He accomplished his mission, and then he went back home. And so Jesus wasn't from here. This was not where he belonged, but he left his main abode in order to accomplish what he chose to accomplish through us. So in Matthew chapter 13, and you're going to have to forgive me, this is going to be somewhat disjointed, I think, just because I wasn't expecting to be covering this material. But down in verse 53 of Matthew 13, when Jesus had finished these parables, he departed from there, and he came to his hometown and began teaching them in their synagogue, so that they were astonished and said, "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And in verse 57, what does it say about they were offended? Why? What was there to be offended at here? What was Jesus doing that could have been so offensive to them?
He rose above the stature. He wasn't part of the religious elite. He was just like they were. Common carpenter, a man who worked with his hands and built things, made things. Where do you get this authority to talk to us like you're some leader over us when you're just one of us?
Mm-hmm. It's challenging to see people that you rub shoulders with rise to prominence. It shouldn't be, but we struggle. We seem to struggle with one of us gaining a high position of authority rather than rejoicing with them and encouraging them and supporting them in that. And I mean, how could you not get behind Jesus and what he was doing and encourage that and support? Why would you not want to do that? But people take offense at things that they have no reason to take offense at. And so they found themselves offended. And of course, the quote, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household." So that's not an easy transition all the time. So Jesus, even in his hometown where he grew up as a young boy into a man, even there he found himself not belonging. You don't fit. You're not one of us. And the thing that I struggle with is when in verse 54 where it said, where did he get this miraculous power? If you know it's miraculous, where's the source of all miracles? These people that would have clearly been raised like him, where would they understand that miracles would come from? Wouldn't they come from God? So why would you be offended at somebody that's coming and presenting God to you? Showing you who God is, showing you what it is that God desires of you. He's clearly from God, for no man can do what you do if he's not sent from God. These rulers and people knew that was the rule, that was the guiding light, and yet they still chose to take offense. Does that happen today? Every day, all the time. We struggle heavily with being able to recognize when we should be, and rather than being offended, these people should have been thankful, right? They should have been appreciative. Fred? I don't know if it's on yet. Can you pass it for me?
I'd kind of like to know when
You didn't want to hold on to that, did you?
when Jesus' mom and his brothers and sisters or his family came to talk to him, and he said, and he ignored them and said, "No, I've got my family here with me right now." I kind of wonder what they wanted to talk about. Did they want to say, "Hey, we need to fix some things here back in the hometown"?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kind of ignored us, and we know you. We're kind of seeing the trend here, and it looks like what you've been doing is probably good. Why don't you come back home and, let's clear this up? I wonder what that conversation,
later on.
What were they coming to talk to him about? Because it was a family matter, because the family showed up
Right.
and said, "Hey, we want to talk with you." And he ignored them. He said, "Nope, I'm with my family."
Right.
So I kind of I would like to have known what their mindset was during that what they wanted to talk about.
My only thing that I've been able to, if this is the same, is this where they went in to see Jesus and he said, "I have my mother and my brother," and they thought that there was something wrong with him. I think, and I can't remember the other passage, but they said he's out of his senses or he's out of his mind. I think they were worried about his mental health. And that, I struggle with Mary, because how could Mary ever struggle with that? Mary is the one that received the vision, had this baby, and she knew she had never been with a man, and she had a baby. How could she ever struggle with that? So unless that's just, that's a 30-year-old memory now, maybe the memories fade, even those amazing memories can fade in time. Maybe she justified it. Well, maybe it wasn't exactly what I thought. There's a lot of things that could have been happening, so that's a great question. It would be interesting to know what they wanted to say. Like, just come home. I'm sorry?
Did it say his mother was questioning him, or just his brothers?
I'd have to go back and look at that passage and see where that was. But there was just some language that indicated to me that they were worried that he wasn't himself. And people were starting to turn on him and get angry with him. And I think they were trying to get him away from that angry crowd, thinking that they would hurt him or something. We'd have to go back and look at that. Where is the passage? We can go look at that. Okay. So anyway, a lot of times, and I've seen this in my own family, where we can isolate ourselves because of problems that we've got in our lives, either marital issues. We feel ostracized from our family. Divorce can do that, right? Divorce can destroy that. You've got somebody that's been addicted, maybe and had to go to prison for a year or two because of some addiction or some crime. When they get out, do you think they feel like they can assimilate right back into where they were? It's hard. It's hard to accept that person. There's trust factors that are built in there that we're trying to protect ourselves from that. People, we can all get to a place where we feel like we don't belong. And I have to wonder sometimes if Jesus, in verse 58, look at what it says. He did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief.
I've got the reference for you now.
Okay, go ahead.
It's from Mark chapter 3, and this is where the scribes and them, and when he started casting out devils.
Healing on the Sabbath? Yeah.
No, well, it was that too, but he was, in the context in Mark chapter 3, verse 22 is where it starts, but basically the scribes start saying that he's got a devil because he's casting out in the name of the devil. That, the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, basically. And that's when this context comes out where it says his brethren are there and his mom was with him. In verse 32, it says, the multitude said about him, and they said unto him, behold, thy mother and thy brethren without seek for thee. And he answered them, saying, who is my mother or brethren? And he looked around. So it was during the context of him saying that that was blasphemy for what he was doing because he was blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. That was the context of that.
Could that not have been that maybe they wanted to get him out to protect him?
Good.
Yeah.
We don't know. That's why I'm saying. To me, it's always I would have liked to know what they wanted to talk to him about.
Yeah, because it can change relationships, can it? It can damage those relationships. And I think Jesus found himself in that situation with his own family.
Well, it says right here in 21 what you said. But when his own people heard about this, they went out to lay hold of him, for they said he's out of his mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, out of his mind. Something wrong with him. And could you see where they could arrive at that? He thinks he can raise people from the dead. He thinks he's healing people.
I was saying, I can relate to that somewhat. Teachers who try to go back to their hometown and teach, they have a lot of grief a lot of times because they remember you when you might have did something stupid or foolish, and people don't forget.
We don't forget.
Any little thing you did that they did also.
Yeah.
Just like you said, prophets not honor except when his own people in his own family. So that's why I moved away.
Yeah, that sounds like, 80% of accidents are within 3 miles of your house. So I moved. Didn't solve the problem. Okay, let me see here.
I've got an interesting story about that. Sandy and I were over in Davidson County, and we met a couple, and their last name happened to be Nelson. Not spelled the way our Nelson's is spelled, but their daughter had dated Jesse at one point, and obviously they didn't marry because it's not Ashley. And this is before we even knew who Jesse was, but when I brought that up to Jesse, he was mum.
Nothing.
I didn't get any dirt or anything out of what happened there. And that family, they spoke highly of Jesse in the family, but something didn't work out in that relationship because when they found out we were members of the church, and and they drew some connections. And when we said that we'd moved away, we started talking, and Jesse came up. So that's one of those stories that Jamie can relate to.
La, 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 la. Well, and now everybody knows about it. His phone will start lighting up now. That's funny. So my very next passage that I was looking at here, that I was going to get to this misjudged and misunderstood by his family, is in Mark 3, verses 21. And then if you skip down, verses 31 and 35 are the passages where it talks about my mother and brother and are those that do the will of God. John 7 talks about how even his brothers didn't believe in him. Now think about that. These are your brothers. They've known you all of your life. And he goes out and he begins, do you think they would have heard the stories growing up about Jesus' birth? Don't you think that would have been a topic of conversation? That the brothers would have been taught all of their life that your oldest brother that would have been an awkward conversation to have. What do you mean, Mom? Well, your dad isn't his dad.
Would that have been
That's what I'm asking. Would that have even been a conversation? But why not? Why would they not have been educated about who this was? I would like to think that my mother, if I had a brother, if he was that, I would want to know that. I would want to know those stories about him, how he came into this world. If he didn't come into the world like I did, tell me the story. You were there. You had a front row seat.
How we know that they knew he didn't come in the way they did?
They would have to just believe their parents. And then they would have to believe the evidence that he presented. because they're watching all of the same thing, that all these other people are flocking to him, and his family is going the other way. Jesus is pulling all these people, and his family's going, I don't know about this. And plus, was Jesus always popular with the leaders? No. So that could have been part of it too, that if they go and attach themselves to him too much, there could be a price to pay for that, right? So there could be a lot of things that are pulling that away, but just the loneliness of Jesus, even though he was surrounded by people that he was here to serve and help and save, he had to just feel sometimes like he was completely alone. And I have to believe that it's in those moments, that's when Jesus goes and really gets alone by himself and spends time communing with his Father. He needed that time because he was not accepted always here, even by his own family. It's just so hard for me to believe that they could watch this, know the history of this man, watch how he grew up, watch how he develops as a man, and how he's able at such a young age to confound the wisest in the wise city, the leading elders. He was confounding them, frustrating them, because he was teaching them at a young age. And that was a struggle. And I'm sure that followed him all of his life. He was the brainiac kid that nobody else could. I don't think Jesus was like that. But I would imagine there were times that they found themselves. Look at Psalm 69. This is a prophetic. This is a prophecy here about. And if I remember right, this is part of a messianic psalm. Go down to Psalm 68 and verse 8. 69 verse 8, I'm sorry. Let's back up. Look at verse 5. O God, it is you who knows my folly, and my wrongs are not hidden from you. May those who wait for you not be ashamed through me, O Lord God of hosts. May those who seek you not be dishonored through me, O God of Israel, because for your sake I have borne reproach. Dishonor has covered my face. I have become estranged from my brothers and an alien to my mother's sons. That was where he was at. He came to save us, and we said no thanks. But he did it anyway. And then when you look down at verse 9, for zeal for your house has consumed me, and the reproaches of those who have reproached you have fallen on me. The zeal that Jesus would have had for his mission would have wilted, and I think did wilt many times the people that were around him. Because when you're around a true leader, somebody that speaks with authority and they're commanding and they know what they're talking about, that can be a challenging place to be. And that's where you have to just be humble and recognize that you're out of your league. You need to just sit down and listen to this one. I mean, have you ever been around people that you could tell right away were people that you just needed to step back away from and just listen to? Yeah, I've met a number of those men, powerful men way up in authority in the government, and it's just, you just need to sit down and shut up, young man. That's what you need to do right now. Listen, learn, grow, get better. Project yourself, see yourself in that position, right? Jesus was constantly, I think, finding himself alienated. I've got John 10 wrote down here, but I don't have any notes next to it. Let's run over there and look at that. John chapter 10. Oh, this is just another part of the division that Jesus created. He told us that he didn't come to bring peace, but to what? Bring a sword. What does he mean when he says, I didn't come to bring peace, but to bring a sword? Because that's shocking to a lot of people that have never heard that language attributed to Christ, that he didn't come to bring peace. Because what is it that everybody talks about they want today? We just want peace. We just want peace. It's just, peace, peace, peace. We got to have peace. We're not always going to have peace. Not when you're dealing with truth and error, because they conflict. And so sometimes there's going to be conflicts that just saying peace and peace and peace isn't going to save anybody. It's not going to serve anybody. So look down in John 10, verses 19. A division occurred again among the Jews because of these words. And what were the words? Yep. If you look back up, he's talking about, I lay down my life that I may take it up again. Look at verse 18. No one has taken it away from me. Nobody's going to take my life away. I'm going to lay it down, but nobody's going to take it. I have authority to lay it down. I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. What's he saying there? I am from God. That's what he's saying. I'm from the Father. He sent me. And that's the division. Because of these words. He has a demon, some are saying. He's insane. He's crazy. Why do you listen to him? Do you ever hear people say that today? Why do you listen to this channel? And just fill in the blank, whatever channel it might be. Why do you listen to this person? Fill in the blank, whoever it might be. Why do you listen to them? That's what they were saying about Jesus. Why are you even listening to this guy? He's clearly crazy. He thinks that he can raise the dead and heal when people over here say he has. Whatever. Right? Can you hear that? I mean, I could hear that conversation breaking down just like that. Well, whatever. I don't even know why you listen to that kook. And they just go on with their day. Right? So many of them are saying this. Others are saying these are not the sayings of one demon-possessed. A demon cannot open the eyes of the blind, can he? I mean, it sounds like these were people that were saying, I watched this happen. And you're saying he's got a demon, and I watched a demon open the eyes of the blind. That doesn't make any sense to me. So you can see why there would be a split, right? Splits happen when somebody tries to get in the way of what truth is. And so that's what was going on here. So Jesus, once again, found himself very much alone out in the middle of this debate. Anybody here have any stories about being rejected because of their faith by their own family? That happens. Not accepted, not wanted, not welcome, not invited to family events. It would make your hair curl. Even if you don't have hair, it would curl if you heard some of the stories about how brethren have treated their brethren when it comes to a family split, comes to a family problem. Won't even speak to one another, won't be in the same room with one another. Fred?
I got a personal anecdote, but it was not family really. It was more job. My wish when I went to the Air Force Academy was to fly the F-16 and become a test pilot and an astronaut. And so I got to pilot training thinking I was going to go fly the F-16. And the little group that I belonged to, we were split up into groups of maybe 30 people. And the group that I belonged to, the commander of the group, who's of the instructor pilots, was a big bomber pilot, and he loved taking everybody to the club on Friday night, doing carrier landings, which is basically you get so drunk that everybody goes out and they open up a table and everybody gets drunk and then they slide across this table like they're landing on a carrier. And I didn't participate, and they all had T-shirts made up, and and I didn't go. So as retaliation, they said, "You're not a fighter pilot. You could never be a fighter pilot. We're not going to recommend you for it because you don't have the right character." I'm like, that's strange. And so and then later on when I went to join the Birmingham Guard in Alabama, I'm from Alabama, I grew up in Alabama, and I left my unit in active duty in Georgia, flying tankers for 7 years and had all these hours, and I went over to Birmingham to join the Guard here because they were losing their fighters to get tankers. And same thing happened there to me there. I get there and I said, "Hey, I'd like to get hired here. I'm from Alabama." The guy who commanded the unit was from Huntsville, from my hometown. I get down there and they said, "Oh, just come down to drill weekend. Come down and And then I went to drill weekend, and afterwards, guess what? You're invited over to somebody's house, and they're all drinking again. And then I said, "Oh, I don't drink." And so it's weird, but it's just the situation. It was always alcohol based. And because I refused the alcohol and wouldn't get drunk with them, I said, "We can't trust anybody. You don't get drunk with us." I said, "That doesn't make sense to me either."
A drunk is the last guy you want to trust.
But it cost me 2 jobs. It cost me the airplane that I wanted to fly, and then it cost me later to join my own Guard unit. So I ended up having to come here to Tennessee, almost 7 years later. The guard unit here took me because they didn't have those drinking requirements. But it's an interesting thing. It does, sometimes, to me, it was those were good decisions for me, but from a career standpoint, they weren't.
Right.
If I just I had other friends that just go get drunk with them. It's only one weekend.
Yeah.
What's the big deal? You'll get a job. The ends justifies the means. I said, I can't do that.
No.
So it's,
Well, and you got to know what you're willing to live with your decision making, right? That you've got to be able to live with it, and that's a big deal. I know I read someplace years after I got out of the military that the number one consumer of alcohol and pornography is the United States government. It buys more alcohol and pornography for its troops than any other place. So when our government does that, we got problems. We got problems in the military when that's the culture and that's the atmosphere. That's not an atmosphere that we need to encourage, and certainly not use it to draw lines in the sand over who's qualified and who's not over that. What a silly way to do it. Let me see. Let's go to any comments, any thoughts or questions on anything? Go to Matthew chapter 26. In this area of being, I guess, lonely, part of it is many times part of being lonely is that you're not understood. And I was talking to a fellow at work today about how important it is. I was actually talking to him about running for office. He's a friend of mine, and he's I'm sorry. It's a situation where he's very, very conservative, super conservative guy, and is very much a believer in separating the government from a whole lot of different functions that we get too caught up in today. But I was talking to him today about our kids and how important it is for our children to get good guidance and good instruction. And that starts from the top, and the family starts from the mom and the dad providing good home and good instruction for the kids. And then eventually it moves up into churches and governments that we need to have churches and governments that present good, solid things for their people to grow families, to support families. That's what God started all of this with a family. It's the very first thing he created after he brought after man and woman were created, he brought them together and created a family. The very first institution created was the home. And that's what's always under attack, and that's what we have to support. We have to get the home back to where they're following Jesus. In Matthew 8, Jesus said, when they said, we're going to follow you anywhere, what did Jesus tell them? Foxes have dens, birds of the air have nests. I don't have a home. This is not my home. So if you want to follow me, you're going to have to leave home, because that's the way it is. And that's going to be a lonely place. Loneliness will find you there. Look at Matthew 26. Let's go down to verse 36. This is the scene at Gethsemane. And I have always believed that this whole scene is amazing to me, because he's been spending 3 years now working with his 12 disciples, with his apostles, and with all the other disciples that are traveling with them. And so this is the moment. This is the crescendo moment, right? This is what it's all coming to. From the very beginning of creation to right now, this moment is what everything has been leading up to. All of God's work is leading up to this night. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, sit here while I go over and pray. And he took with him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and distressed. My soul is deeply grieved, he said to them, to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. And he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, so you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Why do you think they weren't able to do that simple request? I'm going to go over here and pray. Keep watch. And he comes back an hour later, and what are they doing?
They're They don't feel that because they don't understand, even though he's told them, they don't understand that.
That's right. So it's a misunderstanding. Now, they've been with him for 3 years. How is it that they don't understand him yet? Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they're afraid of him. I mean, I could see where being with Jesus could be a little bit intimidating.
Probably still stuck a little bit in the Jewish way of thinking, a lot more physically than
Right, right. Well, and what does Peter do this night when they come to get him? I mean, Jesus was okay with them carrying swords. They carried it I guess, for defensive purposes. But do you think Peter was really just trying to shave his ear off? You know, look at down verse 41. Keep watching and praying that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Do you think Jesus was having a weak moment in the flesh? Oh, he knew what was coming. He knew what was coming. You know, one of the things that broke my heart with Rachel, when we lost Rachel, she knew what was coming. She knew. And she had to just sit there and deal with it. And that was the hardest part for me to watch, was how helpless she was in her own body. Jesus, I think, feels that, only I think you've got to take it way beyond what we could ever deal with our own life. But this man was groaning, grieving to the point of death. Look at what he says in verse 38. My soul is deeply grieved, and an hour later my best friends are sound asleep while I'm over there struggling and grieving to death, sweating great drops of blood. I'm in obvious distress. Where are you? Where are my best friends? They don't get it. They didn't understand the depth of what he was doing, where he came from, who he was, what he knows. Because he had come to that. What had Jesus become to Peter and James and John and the rest of his disciples? What did he become to them? Their friend. A trusted friend. A friend they followed. A friend they believed in. But he's their friend. You know, what are you talking about dying? You're the Christ. You're not going to die. You're going to establish your kingdom. You're going to reign. I think that's what Judas was trying to do. Yeah, I'll tell you who Jesus is. Go get him. Watch what happens when you do this. And then he found out, oh, they're going to kill him. I don't think Judas intended that. I think that's why he got rid of the money. He realized what he had done was wrong. He thought Jesus would just step right into the kingship. We're going to just make you king. He didn't understand the nature of the kingdom, did he? He didn't understand Jesus' work and why he was here and the price that he was willing to pay. I don't think they could even begin to get in their mind that this man that they had watched heal demon-possessed men, that then they watched the hogs run over the cliff and drown themselves into the ocean. They watched this. They watched dead men come out of graves, still bound in grave clothes, and they had to unwrap him so that they could feed him. And they don't know who he is. They don't know what his kingdom is. They can be, that just proves that all of us could have been in the exact same spot and we would have reacted the exact same way. When you don't understand the mission, when you don't understand the purpose, then it's difficult to get behind it and to put your life on the line for it if you don't understand it. Now, would they understand it later? What do you think was the moment where all of this doubt went away? When did all the doubt evaporate out of the apostles and disciples? Resurrection. When they watched the Lord walk through into the building where they're at, still with the gaping wounds all over his body, and he's alive and he's talking to them and he's eating with them. He's sitting down, having conversation, teaching. Do you think they were wide-eared then? They watched this man die on the cross. They saw his body. They saw the gaping wound in his side. They saw the spikes that were pegged through his arms and through his feet. They saw the lashings and the beatings and the crown of thorns and the bloody mess that he was. They watched that.
They still didn't understand it.
No, it took his resurrection. In the Pentecost, when the Spirit came, then these were men that spent their life and they went to their death gladly in service to Christ. That was the change. And that's where we've got to get people to. We've got to get people to quit worrying about all the questions and all the issues. This is Jesus. He's been proven without a doubt of who he is. Submit yourself to him, and then you can begin growing in Christ. But if you think that you got to learn all about Jesus before you can even begin to follow him, you're missing the point. You're just missing the point, because we're never going to understand it all. Misunderstood, he was misunderstood constantly. So when we get misunderstood in our life, we have to be able to take a breath, not get excited, right? Not get offended, not get angry. Just take a breath and let's try to come together and reason, saith the Lord. That's what we have to be able to do. John 7. And this is, this can be a very emotional reading. Let's go to John. Let's look in verse 40 of John 7. I want to read down. I want to kind of build up to this moment. Some of the people, therefore, when they heard these words, were saying, "This certainly is the prophet." Others were saying, "This is the Christ." And others were saying, "Surely the Christ is not going to come from Galilee, is he? Has not the Scripture said that the Christ comes from the descendants of David and from Bethlehem, the village where David was?" So a division occurred in the crowd because of him. Some of them wanted to seize him, but no one laid hands on him. The officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees, and they said to him, "Why did you not bring him?" And the officers answered and said, "Never has a man spoken the way this man speaks." The Pharisees then answered, "You also have not been led astray, have you? No one of the rulers of the Pharisees has believed in him, has he? But this crowd which does not know the law is accursed." Nicodemus, he who came to him being one of them, said to them, "Our law does not judge a man unless it first hears from him and knows what he is doing, does it?" They answered him, "You are not also from Galilee, are you? Search and see that no prophet arises out of Galilee." And everyone went to his home, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Isn't that interesting? Everybody goes home. He's out teaching. He's out working. Everybody goes home. And he goes off by himself to the Sea of Galilee, or to the Mount of Olives. And then in the morning, he came in. So he spent the night there, apparently. And in the morning, he came into the temple, and all the people were coming to him. And he sat down, and he began to teach them. Jesus had to endure a lot of loneliness in order to serve, in order to come here and do what he did. So loneliness is going to happen to us. We're all going to be alone at some point, sometimes in our life. Most of us, anyway, will be. And it does happen. I hope this was good filler information tonight. So thank you.